Hello, hello. This is the my artifact episode number 3430. Sorry, 3647 maybe. Yeah. Today's date is wait. Okay, is it recording? Yeah, it's recording. Okay. I'm actually security scanning my phone. It's kind of like showing me some sort of recommendation that I should supposed to be scan my mobile phone because it has some sort of threats. Clear, no, I don't want that. Clean up, yeah, I wanted to clean up. Okay, let's clean up the caches. Okay, in my phone I have 1.98 GB of trash size. Okay, that is good. All right. Okay, is it recording? Hello, is it recording? Okay, it's recording. All right, yeah. Okay, so this is my artifact episode number 3647. Yeah, 48, I'm not really sure exact number. Today's date is October 17, 2025. It's been almost like a morning at 8:50 a.m. By the way, I'm actually kind of like a recording artifact very late in this morning. I usually record artifact early as possible, like a 7 a.m. or 7:30 a.m. But unfortunately, is that yeah, I was kind of like a reading my book, and I decided that let's read a book first and then record artifacts. So yeah. All right. So let's just jump into the question. Okay, let's go. Now the question is that wait, where is question? Okay, yeah. Okay. The question is that what if Cold War turn into hot? Oh, that's a really good question. That is a really good question. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like a force you to think about answer. It kind of like a somebody leaves your comfort zone and try to create that imaginary world that question is actually wants. And depending upon the knowledge that you are creating that world. So it's kind of like a somebody really challenging and really fascinating way to give the answer. It just kind of like a somebody kind of like a somebody has forced me to think about how much knowledge that I have and how much I kind of like a somebody utilize that knowledge to execute this answer. Okay. Also, disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's raw, it's unfiltered, it's my opinion regarding about this topic. So if you are seeking for this kind of like information, go to the internet. You have multiple sources. Do not trust what is exactly my opinion. It's my opinion, it's my thought process regarding about this question. All right, are you good? Should we proceed? Let's go. Now, regarding about this question, the question says that what if the Cold War turn into hot? First of all, what is actually Cold War? Well, after the World War, there is a kind of like a misconception is actually happened. Okay, yeah, what's a misconception? Okay, yeah. So in the World War, okay, yeah, the United States (US) is kind of like a invented nuclear bomb. Okay, yeah. And basically, why they kind of like invented nuclear bomb? Because of that, World War II kind of like a bring a lot of destruction. And after using all those kind of like a tactics and things, and that Hitler won't stop, Germany won't stop, Nazi won't stop, and they are kind of like only conquering the rest of the world and things like that, and create instability and things like that. Okay, US United States or like America wants to end of all those things. Okay, yeah. So at that time they are kind of like invented a nuclear bomb. Okay, yeah. By the way, they wanted to kind of like somebody such a bomb that kind of like somebody create a massive destruction. Because before that they have a bomb, but they are kind of not creating that much destruction. But they build such a bomb that kind of like create such a destruction that could die. Millions of people will gonna die. All the species, infrastructure, everything will gonna destroy with just one bomb. Now, if I'm trying to imagine from our point of perspective or this today's point of perspective, it's bitly common. Okay, bitly kind of like a things that a one bomb can kind of like destroy entire city. It was kind of like a feel like that. Yeah, okay, yeah, I could see in the movie and stuff like that. But this point of perspective is not even exist after the war. Like, if it's not even exist in the like a nuclear bomb, nothing really at all. Like basically is this thing at that time, a bomb would kind of like destroy how much? Like a probably maybe like a 10 meter, 20 meter, or maybe just 100 meter mostly, or maybe just say 1 kilometer. This is what kind of like a bomb intensity, and that's kind of like a bomb. Yeah, but nuclear bomb is a kind of like a very differently. Okay, yeah. When Oppenheimer kind of like invented this nuclear bomb, they realized that how much destruction power is this thing, and US wants to utilize this power. Okay, yeah. So basically, what does they do is that okay, they stop war with Germany. Okay, yeah. But there is a Japan who's kind of like a fighting, and they wanted to stop this nuclear. They wanted to stop this war, this world war. They wanted to end it. Okay, yeah. So they just drop the bomb and kind of like boom, everything is gone and things like that. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is this thing: what if US kind of like actually stop the war without nuclear bomb? Then this might be kind of like a something very new reality will gonna happen. Like instead of United States dropping the bomb, they kind of like a somebody strategize and kind of like a stop the Japan with the military forces and things like that. This would create the new reality. But because of US is kind of like a simply bombarded the atomic bomb, which realized that ki how much US has power. Like what I'm trying to tell you is this thing: the nuclear bomb event is not gonna kind of like a simply destroy just a Japan. It kind of like a simply destroy the multiple, like basically at that time I'm talking about 1945. At that time the countries are kind of like simply have very egoistic things like that, like which country has kind of like a simply much bigger weapons and things like that. And at that time the country's strength is determined by the how much weapon that they have. Okay, yeah. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing: that at that time US is kind of like build such a bomb that kind of like a destroy millions of people in a one go. This was kind of like such an innovation that other people are kind of like a terrified. They kind of like a think that ki what if kind of like a US bomb this nuclear in our country, then we will gone. Like basically we just not gonna exist. Like basically we will gonna wipe out from the earth planet. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing at that time, like they are not really scared United States, like they don't really scared of that, but they kind of like always have fear that ki United States have immense power of nuclear bomb and they're gonna use it whenever they want, and we cannot do anything at all. So basically is this thing at that time Russia was kind of like a simply very much kind of like a problem because of that. Not Russia, sorry, USSR. Okay, yeah. Because at that time there is no Russia, there is a USSR. Okay, yeah. So USSR is kind of like very terrified regarding about the innovation regarding about the bomb that US made, and they are kind of like really scared of that, and they wanted to make this bomb as quickly as possible as they can, because they it's kind of like it's kind of like a something that key. If this like if like a basically at that time, okay, there are multiple countries by the way. Okay, yeah, and very powerful country like a Britain, France, Germany. Okay, yeah, they have kind of like a something, yeah, they are really powerful, okay, regarding about the military strength and things like that. Okay, yeah. But US, France, these are kind of a countries are very friendly to US. Okay, yeah. And basically this is not the kind of like a hit list. Okay, like France and Britain, they are not kind of like a hit list. They might have some sort of issues, but that issues kind of like solved by the diplomacy. But Russia is the only country who is kind of like a bigger in size, as well as kind of like a something very less kind of like a something less equipped with the weapons and things like that. Okay, yeah. And Russia always literally scared that ki what if might be US has a kind of like a something a bomb that detonates and we might gonna kind of like a destroy and things like that. So before this thing happened, we need to make this weapon. So Russian are making the nuclear bomb, and because of Russia making the nuclear bomb, US is also making the bomb, because both countries have the spies, like basically the US spies in Russia, Russian spies in US. They are kind of like somebody in between in everywhere, like a Pentagon, like every CIA, every kind of like a nuclear facilities and things like that. Okay, yeah. Let me tell you the reality story. In entire world, how many countries have nuclear technology? US, France, Britain, Russia, India, Pakistan, China. Okay, and might be Israel. Okay, yeah. So there are almost like 8 countries have technology. Okay, also North Korea. Okay, North Korea also have technology too. Okay, yeah. So there are almost like 9 countries have nuclear bomb. Oh yeah, 9 country have nuclear bomb. So let's just kind of like simply assume in the world there is 100% nuclear bomb. Okay, yeah. In the 100%, almost like 63% of the nuclear bomb is actually accumulated by only 2 countries, Russia and US. Okay, like basically in India we might have kind of like maybe 50 warhead, 50 or maybe 50 or maybe 100 possibly. China, they have probably maybe 200 or 300 nuclear warhead. Pakistan might have maybe 20 or maybe, yeah, like warhead means like bomb. Okay, yeah. Israel might have kind of like assembly maybe 10 or 20. North Korea might be have 10 and 20, but US has almost like a 1000 to 2000 warhead. Okay, these are the minimum number. And Russia has a one of the biggest, like a basically 3000 to 4000 warhead, nuclear warhead is actually exists at the moment in 2025 at the moment. And by the way, Russia made a such a Russia made a kind of like a something such a nuclear bomb called as a TSAR nuclear bomb. TSAR nuclear bomb. I'm not really sure the exact name of that. This bomb is kind of like a simply the like basically the mixture of kind of like a simply like a basically just 10-20 bomb put together in one bomb, that is called TSAR bomb. And this bomb have capacity to kind of like a destroy the planet, legitimately destroy the planet. But why nuclear bomb are so destructive? Like basically, like we actually made a lot of bombs, but why nuclear bomb are so destructive? Because nuclear bomb are not kind of like a somebody TNT, or not kind of like a somebody just a kind of like a somebody bomb with kind of like a sulfur and things like that. No, this is the atomic bomb. Okay, I'm not gonna telling you regarding about all the internal structure, how it actually happen and things like that. But it kind of like is based on fusion technology. Okay, yeah. Now what's the fusion technology? Okay, our sun has a kind of like assembly lot of hydrogen in it. Okay, yeah. Now 4 hydrogen atom combined together create one helium atom and massive amount of energy. This is called nuclear fission or nuclear fusion. I'm not really sure exact name of it. Okay, yeah. But this kind of like assembly same technology are utilizing in the atomic bomb. Okay, yeah. So basically, this thing, the immense energy that kind of like is be created in the atomic bomb or nuclear bomb is actually happened by the chain reaction, because in the sun there is a kind of like a chain reaction happen. Okay, yeah. This is the same thing, chain reaction happen over here. Like basically the isotope radioactive kind of like always wanted to stable, and when it wanted to stable, there is a it releases the 3 electron item. When it releases the 3 electron item, it combine with another kind of like a element and create the massive amount of energy. And it was kind of like a happened in the split of the second, and kind of like a massive amount of energy is actually exploded within a fraction of the second, and just destruction, legitly very big destruction. So yeah, basically this thing, World War II was never really kind of like something that much scary. Yeah, it is a scary. Yeah, it is a scary. They are kind of like utilizing all the bombs and things and that and stuff like that. But the end of the World War II was actually happened by the World War. It kind of like shook the entire world. Like basically they just think that ki US is very powerful country, and we can't afford to kind of like a something just a fight back, or we can't afford to kind of like a something give them like a basically is this thing like a upset or things like that. Like basically is this thing, US became the king because he has the immense power of this nuclear bomb. So that's why Russia is bitterly hesitate, so that's why they build the nuclear bomb and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now why the Cold War happened, what is actually the reason behind it? Okay, yeah. The Cold War is actually happened is because of, first reason is a nuclear bomb that I already mentioned. Okay, yeah, because of that Russia is actually making a lot of nuclear bomb. US is actually making a lot of nuclear bomb. Okay, by the way, if the Russia is making the nuclear bomb, then what does US think? US thinks that ki those nuclear bomb are actually made to fight to us. So obviously we should supposed to be prepared for that. So US is also making the nuclear bomb. So because of this kind of like only both the countries are making the nuclear bomb, and they are bitterly scared of each other, that key which one gonna bombard that nuclear bomb in on us and things like that. So they are kind of like a prepared and things like that. So they are kind of like making a lot of nuclear bomb and things like that. This is the first reason, by the way, and one of the important reason for the Cold War. Okay, first thing. There is no kind of like a issue is between, like there is might be kind of like a minor issues, but probably is this thing, the nuclear bomb is one of the biggest issue. Okay. Another thing is the NATO. Okay, after the kind of like a simply the World War II. Okay, European countries are very fragile. They don't really have any kind of like a strength to armies and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. And basically NATO countries, actually a European country wants a protection. Okay, yeah. They need a kind of like a somebody assurance that there might be not a kind of like a somebody such a country will try to invade us and things like that, because we don't really have that much kind of like a strength of military power and things and that. Like let's just say kind of like a bunch of kind of like countries have a Britain and France and things like that. They are not really capable enough, because they already kind of like lost so many soldiers and warheads in the nuclear war, World War One and World War Two. Okay, so they need a kind of like some assurance, and that assurance actually came from the US. Okay, yeah, and that assurance called as a NATO. Okay, North Atlantic Organization Treaty, probably. Yeah. So according to the NATO, what exactly is this thing? If any country kind of like a simply fight against this country, like basically let's just say US, then France, Britain, then Germany, then and lot of kind of like a NATO countries. Okay, yeah, they are at this point there may be almost like a 20 to 25 countries that actually exist in the NATO. Okay, yeah. So what exactly NATO stand for? Like what exactly NATO does? NATO does that if someone country, let's just say Russia, is kind of like a somebody uh, uh, kind of like a started a war with a kind of like let's just say France. Okay, yeah. So basically, when this thing happened, the France is kind of like a not really that much equipped with this kind of like a some heavy military stuff and things like that. Russia has a very military power, but France doesn't really have that. And when Russia might kind of like attack the France, then France will be very vulnerable. So in that particular position, the France has a kind of like a treaty with every country. So every country are kind of like a something try to protect the France, but not only protect the France, they are kind of like a fight back. So what exactly is this thing? When any country is kind of like a somebody started a war with a kind of like a one NATO country, all the NATO country will gonna fight to that particular country. So basically Russia started a war with the France, then France like then Russia will kind of like a somebody started a war with all the NATO countries, like in US, then kind of like a somebody Britain, then kind of like a somebody that give France, and then every countries and things like that, including everything. So which makes it kind of like a very vulnerable, and this is what kind of like a things that keep it kind of like a leaded to started a war. But why the NATO established? Like what is the actually reason for that? Okay, same reason, nuclear. Oh yeah, is because of that ki Russia is kind of like somebody building a lot of nuclear bomb. Okay, yeah, because of they are bitterly scared of kind of like somebody US. Okay, yeah, but the Russia is actually making a lot of nuclear bombs, so European countries are also really scared too. Like they also really scared that ki Russia might be kind of like a somebody they will gonna kill us with the nuclear bomb and things like that. We are also really vulnerable because we don't really have a nuclear bomb. So basically, at that time, they wanted to assurance from the US, because at that time the France and Britain have a kind of like a really friendly relationship with the US. So they want really assurance, and that assurance called NATO. It's also, so basically it all leads to nuclear bomb. Okay, yeah, it all leads to nuclear bomb. Okay, yeah. So basically, one of the kind of like only one of the biggest reason for kind of like started a nuclear bomb is the one of the started the Cold War is a nuclear bomb. Yeah, because they made a nuclear bomb. Yeah, they might have Russia and kind of like a US. They always have kind of like a some certain issues regarding about this and that and that. Now, what about the kind of like a Cuban? Okay, yeah, Cuban Missile Crisis. What exactly is this thing? So Cuban Missile Crisis is one of the chapter of the kind of like assembly Cold War, okay, yeah, between the Russia and the US. In this particular, okay, that key at the time we have ballistic missile. Okay, yeah, let me tell you regarding about the ballistic missile. Ballistic missile is such a missile that if we kind of like assembly fire this missile from here, okay, let's just say I'm living in India, I'm living in Maharashtra, my hometown is a Wardha, so I have this kind of like assembly ballistic missile, okay, yeah, and I kind of like press the button and kind of like assembly fire this ballistic missile into kind of like a somewhere in China or in anywhere at all. Like basically is this thing, the ballistic intercontinental ballistic missile has a range of almost like 1,000 to 5,000 kilometer. So basically is this thing that my rocket will kind of like a simply fire anywhere around the 5,000 kilometer circumference. So basically, if I kind of like launch the bomb from here, I would kind of like detonate the Shanghai. I will detonate the kind of like a Beijing. I would detonate the, yeah. So this is called kind of like a simply intergalactic ballistic missile. Sorry, intercontinental ballistic missile. In ballistic missile, intercontinental missile. Probably I'm not really sure about that. Okay. Yeah. Now this technology are actually exist today, but I'm talking about 1945 or 1950. At that time, this technology was not even exist. Means like that. Yeah, they built the nuclear bomb, but problem is that he, if they wanted to kind of like a fire the nuclear bomb in any country, they need a kind of like a somebody missile. Okay, yeah. Now let me tell you one thing regarding about missile. At that time, yes, missile was exist, but it was, the range was very low, like probably maybe like a 50 kilometer to 100 kilometer. That's it. That is a maximum efficiency. Okay, yeah, because that missile really required a rocket, and that rocket really required a fuel to carry the weight of the bombs and things, and that it was a kind of like a something very crazy thing. Let me tell you one thing. When the World War II, the Hiroshima Nagasaki was actually bombarded by the nuclear bomb. Okay, Fat Man, okay, and another, I'm not really sure the name of that another bomb, okay. So which is actually kind of like a somebody went, bomber plane is actually went, and that bomber plane is actually detonate the bomb in the Japan. So basically bomber plane went into the Japan, okay, went into the kind of like a somebody the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and kind of like a fire the bomb. Okay, so basically, a plane went to the Japan and kind of like a fire the bomb. But in this kind of like a particular missile technique, a missile can go itself and kind of like a fire in its own. Okay, without any kind of like a human intervention and things like that. Now, basically, this type of technology was not even exist at that time at the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, yeah. So what they want, okay, yeah, because the US and Russia is very far away from each other, very very far away. Like basically, there is a Europe and there is Atlantic in between us. So possible chances to fire on each other is like a not okay, yeah. Like basically, if they have a kind of like a bomb, if they have kind of like a nuclear bomb in Moscow, and they wanted to fire that nuclear bomb into the Washington DC, the distance is more than 1,000 kilometer, more than 1,000 kilometer. And basically, even if we have kind of like a nuclear technology, we can't even kind of like fire the nuclear bomb over there. Like our nuclear bomb will not gonna bend there. And basically is this thing, what if we could kind of like land the nuclear bomb into the aeroplane and kind of like simply fire that aeroplane, like basically we fly that aeroplane to the Washington DC and then drop it down. Will it be possible? No, that is not also possible too, because of that at that time we also build the radar too. Okay, so what is actually radar? A radar is a kind of like a something, the kind of like a surveillance area of kind of like a something your airspace. Okay, yeah. What do you mean by airspace? Let me tell you one thing. We are using GPS right now, Google Maps. In the Google Maps, we are kind of like a seeing the routes and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. This is exactly same thing a radar do. Okay, yeah. What is actually radar? Radar is kind of like somebody is this thing. In the GPS, we have all those kind of like some buildings and things and that. So we are kind of like somebody know where it turn right or left or things like that. But in the sky, there is no turn left and right and things like that. There is a complete clear sky. Okay, what you have kind of like an intervention in the sky, maybe cloud and things like that. Okay, so basically, what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that if there is a plane is actually coming to us and kind of like a bomb, that plane is very vulnerable regarding about not seeing anybody, because everyone might gonna see, and probably if the countries have a kind of like a some missiles or kind of like a some bomb, they would kind of like a fire the bomb to the plane, and probably before the plane kind of like a bomb, the nuclear bomb, they will kind of like a destroy in itself, because that plane is actually seen by the country. Okay, because of the radar, because radar is kind of like a somebody somebody sending a signal to the all over the surrounding area, and kind of like a somebody that detect that key there is a kind of like a aircraft is actually coming to us, and that aircraft is kind of like a somebody very essential, that aircraft is kind of like a somebody carry some sort of bomb and things like that. So it is kind of like a somebody our responsibility to kind of like a somebody fight that plane and things like that. So that's why we build the radar. Okay, yeah. So possibly is this thing, we cannot kind of like send the nuclear bomb to the plane, because it's not possible, because okay, yeah. Another thing is that ki Moscow and Washington DC are very 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 far away from each other. Okay, yeah. So how do we supposed to kind of like somebody the fire the nuclear bomb? As Russia always kind of like somebody says this thing, if the tension is actually accelerate between the kind of like somebody Russia and US, so how do we supposed to fire? Okay, yeah. For the US, they don't really have any issue regarding about that, because let me tell you one thing, US has a kind of like a signed the NATO treaty with all the European country. So basically is this thing that means that ki European nuclear, sorry, that means the US made nuclear missile or nuclear bomb can kind of like a somebody stored in maybe kind of like a somebody Germany, or kind of like a somebody France, or maybe kind of like a somebody close to the kind of like a USSR boundaries. Okay, yeah. So that means kind of like a somebody that Russia is always been checked. Like basically, if the US wants to hit the Russia, they press the button and they would kind of like a somebody hit the target. Okay, without any human intervention or things like that, because the distance between the kind of like a somebody Germany and USSR is far more less than maybe 500 kilometer. Okay, so which is kind of like a far more easier for US. Okay, because they are already signed the treaty of nuclear NATO treaty and things like that. Okay, yeah. But the Russia is kind of like a vulnerable. Okay, because Russia is always kind of like a thing that key, what if we have a nuclear bomb, and if we wanted to detonate the nuclear bomb into the US soil, then how do we supposed to do that thing? Okay, we need a kind of like a somebody colony that should supposed to be kind of like a fire the nuclear bomb, Russian nuclear bomb, to the US territory. How do we supposed to do that? So at that time there is a Cuba. Okay, so Cuba is a country, by the way, and it's a kind of like a something, I'm not really sure, it's a kind of a colony of Russia or things like that. But what I know that ki Cuba is a kind of like a something country was probably in a colony of Russia or maybe something, I'm not really sure. But the Cuban government are kind of like allow Russian government that they would kind of like store their nuclear bomb in their land. Okay, yeah. So what exactly it means? It means that the Russian nuclear missile are very close to the kind of like something the US territory. Okay, because Cuba is actually far close to the US. Okay, very close. That means like if the Russian wants to kind of like hit the kind of like a somebody bomb with the hit the nuclear bomb with the US. So it's kind of like a far easy distance, like a Cuba and kind of like Washington DC might be kind of like a somebody 700 kilometer or very less than that. Okay, like other than Washington, they might have a target like a New York or kind of like a New Jersey or kind of like California. All those kind of like somebody cities are kind of like somebody in target. So when this thing has actually happened, this was kind of like a very catastrophic. Okay, when the US knows that ki Russian nuclear missile are kind of like a simply shipped towards from Russia to Cuba, and when these things actually happen, the US is kind of like in between tension. Okay, like if this kind of like a somebody ship, the nuclear missile ships are kind of like a somebody cross the Atlantic and they went to the Cuba, that means it kind of like started a war. Okay, yeah, a World War III, and that World War III will go nuclear gonna war. So this is kind of like a very crazy thing happened, and probably it was kind of like one of the fucked up shit at that time, because like basically the US and Russia, they not only all those countries, like basically every countries are really scared about this new Cuban missile crisis, because it was really fucked up shit that if this thing happened, if the Russian submarine or if the Russia kind of like a shipment is kind of like somebody crossed the Atlantic and they went to the Cuba, that means started the World War III. Okay, yeah. So it is kind of like some very much higher chances that kind of like some World War III will gonna start, and very chaos thing happened, very 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 chaos thing happened. Okay, yeah. So what exactly happened, how this actually happened? So basically what exactly happened, that he a shipment who has a kind of like a something the bomb. Okay, yeah. what exactly happened that ki the Russian military, sorry, the Russian shipment, like basically what exactly happened. Okay, imagine, okay, there is a kind of like a movie is actually kind of like simply focus on the Russian Cuban crisis is the X-Men First Class. Okay, yeah, but by the way, in X-Men First Class, they kind of like actually mention the mutants and things and that, but that is not kind of like a true. Okay, yeah, but rest of the nuclear kind of rest of the kind of like something the Cuban Missile Crisis kind of like something happened very true. Okay, like you will not gonna get exact information regarding about the Cuban Missile Crisis, but still you might get at least like a 40% of the information right. Okay, so what exactly happened? What exactly is this thing? Okay, so imagine there is a kind of like a line. Okay, and this is the line that kind of like a simply that cross that shipment will Russian shipment. If the this like basically this is kind of like a ship which carry the nuclear bomb. Okay, yeah, that ship is kind of like a simply shipping the nuclear bomb from Russia to Cuba, and this is the line in between. Okay, yeah. Now this ship is cross this line. That means World War III will gonna start. Okay, yeah. So is this kind of like a somebody line is kind of like a defending by the US Coast Guard. Okay, yeah. And also there is a kind of like a somebody Russian Coast Guard too, like a not Coast Guard, like a Russian kind of like a somebody warhead and kind of like a warship was actually exist over there. Okay, yeah. Those Russian warship are kind of like a try to prevent this kind of like a nuclear missile ship. Okay, yeah. If something happened with them, so those are really responsible. Okay, yeah. And there is a kind of like a somebody US Coast Guard and US kind of like a somebody the warhead and warships are also exist over there. Okay, so its entire battlefield is kind of like a ready in the Atlantic. Okay, yeah. So what exactly happened? I'm not really sure exactly what exactly happened. I don't really have any prior information, but still this is the Russian ship carrying the nuclear missile from Russia to Cuba. And when it crossed the line, it started gonna war. So before this happened, there is a Russian warhead ship fire the bomb at Russian nuclear ship. Okay, and destroy its own ship. Like basically the Russian ship is kind of like a destroy its own ship. And this happened and the World War III is actually stopped. And I don't know how this happened. Okay, like basically some says that they wanted to stop this kind of like assembly nuclear war and World War III and things like that. So that's why they kind of like stop this thing, because probably if that shipment crossed that line, that means World War III gonna happen, and probably yeah, it will gonna kind of like a destruction of all and things like that. So this is kind of like a very 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 heavy tension at that time when the nuclear Cuban missiles is actually started. It was really fucked up shit, very very like a lot of like a, in the US there is a kind of like a people thinks that there is might be kind of like a somebody the World War III gonna happen, so probably people are kind of like a stockpile, people are creating bunkers and things and that and stuff like that. God knows what they kind of like a building and stuff like that. Okay, it was kind of like a heavy thing happened, like inflation, stock market down, everything is actually collapsed. Like basically when this thing actually happened, like everyone knows that Cuban Missile Crisis will gonna start in a couple of hours. Boy, like just imagine the tension over there. Literally just like that just people are thinking that this is kind of like a end of the world, and like basically is this thing, this war, this World War III will not just World War III, it's the end of war. Okay, yeah, it kind of like a destroy, it's like we are actually building such a weapon that kind of like a destroy everything, dude. Okay, and we build so many weapon that we will gonna destroy our planets, not just one, not just two, not just almost like a more than 10 times we can destroy our planet. This is how much we build the weapons, and this is very 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 crazy. It's just like really fucked up and things like that. So when the Cold War turn into the hot, it will kind of like a somebody very disaster situation. But dude, there is a one question arise. Okay, as you mentioned that the nuclear bomb is kind of like a destroy a entire city. Okay, yeah, but how much it kind of like a destroy the planet? Even if they fire the hundreds of nuclear bomb, how much it destroy the planet? Well, that's a really good question. Okay, okay, let me tell you one thing what exactly happened. Okay, so when the nuclear bomb hit, it kind of like a destroy that city. Okay, then radiation happened. With the radiation, all the species are radioactive. Humans won't be able to survive. If you want example, go to the Chernobyl. In Ukraine, there is a kind of like a city named Chernobyl. No, there is no nuclear bomb is actually happened, but there is a kind of like a sort of nuclear explosion happened. Like there is a kind of like a nuclear power plant was there and kind of like a exploded, and kind of like a radioactive energy is kind of like a spill all over the kind of like a, some the Ukraine and Chernobyl and things like that. Now this place is kind of like so radioactive that maybe for a centuries we might not went there. If we went there, probably we are kind of like somebody getting cancer and we might gonna die within maybe kind of like a couple of decades and things like that. So this is very crazy thing. Okay, first of all, this is the radiation kind of like a destroy all those things. Okay, but what exactly happened, what is exactly is this thing? Okay, as you mentioned, like as I mentioned, this bomb, it kind of like a detonate and it kind of like a somebody just really fucked up. Like basically when this bomb is kind of like a bombard, so much amount of debris means like that, like basically when the bomb is kind of like hit the ground, it kind of like a create hole in itself. Okay, and they kind of like a release the debris, like whatever they actually around that bomb, it kind of like a simply fly and things like that. Now regarding about the bomb intensity, it kind of like a depends on how much debris can fly. Okay, yeah, if I have kind of like a fire the grenade, it might kind of like a release a very small debris. But if I fire the nuclear bomb, that debris will kind of like something so massive, so massive. Just imagine that ki when you fire the nuclear bomb, that debris is kind of like equivalent to the size of the city. Oh, okay, yeah, means like that all the dust and particles and things and that and that and that. Now what exactly happened? And as also ash too. Okay, by the way, like when the nuclear bomb is actually hit, there's a lot of kind of like a big like a fire mushroom and cloud is actually created. Okay, that is called ash too. Okay, yeah. So when this thing ash and debris are kind of like a went to the kind of like a some troposphere or kind of like a some ionosphere. Okay, our atmosphere is kind of like a filled with a multiple layers of sphere. Okay, yeah. So if that debris is actually went into the kind of like a something the troposphere or ionosphere, okay, yeah, and that ashes will kind of like a flown towards the rest of the countries, okay, yeah, rest of the cities and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now this ash is black in color. Okay, yeah, kind of like a something very hydro monoxide or things like that. And those ash are accumulated lot of heat in itself. Okay, yeah, and they won't release that heat. So what exactly happened, that it block the sunlight, it block that ashes and debris will block the sunlight. Let me tell you one thing, that debris will not gonna fall very easily. That debris will gonna stay into the atmosphere for very long period of time. Okay, and that debris will stay into very long period of time. It kind of like a block the sun, it block the sunlight and things like that. And when it blocked the sunlight, the nuclear winter is actually happened. Okay, yeah. Now this is not just a normal winter, this is the nuclear winter. Now what exactly nuclear winter means? A nuclear winter means like that, the because of there is no sunlight, there is no photosynthesis happen. Like our plants are kind of like a simply run on photosynthesis. Because of the kind of like a sunlight that it gets, they kind of like a create its food in itself. And because of plant create food in itself, the animal and we are kind of like a rely on plants because we are getting food from them. Okay, yeah. But because of this nuclear winter actually happened, the sun is actually like a the entire globe, our earth globe is actually covered by the ash and debris and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. And when this thing happened, entire atmosphere is actually covered. Okay, so there is no sunlight. Because of no sunlight, the photosynthesis is not gonna happen. The plant might gonna die very easily first. We are rely on plants, so we will also gonna die, or we will also gonna die because food shortage and things like that. This is the one problem. Another problem, this is the nuclear winter. That means nuclear winter means like that ki the snows and kind of like a rainfall will gonna happen. That rainfall is not kind of like a normal rainfall, that is the acidic rainfall. Okay, yeah. Like basically because of our troposphere or ionosphere is actually filled with the ashes and things like that. So those are kind of like an acidic rainfall happen. Those acidic rainfall that kind of like a spoil our water system and everything. It kind of like a simply destroy all those kind of like a simply water reservoir everywhere. Okay, whatever the water will gonna remain, it will kind of like a destroy, it will gonna acidic and things like that, which is not capable enough to digest our drink. It's kind of like a something just a poison that we are drinking. Okay, yeah. and it will not gonna affect us. It will gonna affect every animal and everything. Also, let me tell you one thing. When the nuclear winter is actually started, there is a kind of like assembly. Let me tell you one thing. Our entire planet is actually have a balance between the greenhouse gases. Okay, yeah. Too much greenhouse gases will kind of like rise the temperature. Okay, right now we are kind of like facing this global warming, is because of that too much too much green gases is actually available on the planet. So that's why we are kind of like seeing a lot of pollutions and things and that. Okay, yeah. When there is a less greenhouse gases, that means create the kind of like a ice age era. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that there is a balance between the kind of like a greenhouse gases. Like it shouldn't supposed to be less, it shouldn't supposed to be more, it should supposed to be kind of like a equal. But because of this nuclear winter started, okay, there is a kind of like a sudden drop in greenhouse gases. Sudden drop in greenhouse gases. And because of sudden drop in greenhouse gases, entire planet will become the ice globe. Literally, like a everything, like a basically the Sahara to the Antarctica to the Atlantic to the Pacific, everything will gonna freeze. Everything will gonna freeze. And this is the end of civilization. This is end of our planet, probably. And it will gonna kind of like a take centuries or like a thousands of years to recover. So it will gonna destroy our planet. So this is the consequences happen when we use a nuclear bomb. Okay, by the way, this will not gonna happen by just kind of like a hitting one nuclear bomb. Definitely not. Okay, but still, is this thing in the war? If the one country is actually fire the one nuclear bomb, other country fight two nuclear bomb, then three nuclear bomb, then four nuclear bomb, or five nuclear bomb. Imagine that maybe almost like a 2-3 bomb, or maybe kind of like a basically only two bomb is actually detonate on the planet and destroy the entire cities, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. What if kind of like somebody is just saying that 100 nuclear bomb will detonate on the planet? It shook the planet in half, like it kind of like ripped the planet in half and things like that. So if the Cold War turn into hot, this is end of our civilization. Why this is not happen? Okay, yeah, because we are human. We make mistakes and we learn from our mistake. We understand how much nuclear bomb it kind of like only destroy us, how much nuclear bomb has a capacity, how much nuclear bomb have destruction. Because when the nuclear bomb detonate, it does not judge who you are, what kind of like a casteism, or are you Russian or US and Europe. No, it destroy everything. So when the nuclear bomb is actually detonate, obviously US will gonna face the loss and Russia will gonna face the loss too. Because in the war, no one will gonna win. Everywhere is destruction. And both the countries are knows that nuclear bomb is only way to give the destruction to the both the countries. It's not giving any advantage in any war and things like that. So that's why probably this is a really good decision that in that Cuban Missile Crisis, that the Russian submarine or Russian warship kind of like destroy its own ship, and that kind of like stop the nuclear Cuban missiles. I'm not really sure the exact information that I'm trying to tell you, but this is what I know. This is my opinion regarding about that. So that is a really good thing, and we learn from our mistakes, and that's why we called as a human. We learn, we understand, and we grow from it. Nuclear bomb still exist. Yeah, nuclear bomb still exist, and we are trying to prevent that nuclear bomb. We also have a commission, okay, yeah, to kind of like prevent, we also kind of like create a treaty, okay, that other countries might not make the nuclear bomb, okay, nuclear proliferation treaty. In this treaty, other countries might not make the nuclear bomb. Okay, if the other countries make the nuclear bomb, then probably they will kind of like simply go to the economical warfare. Economical warfare means the trade war and things like that, which is kind of like simply far more good for every possible way. Okay. So this, if the nuclear war, if this kind of like something, the Cold War turn into the hot, it might kind of like destroy everything. But the Cold War is not just add destruction. The Cold War adds so much value in our human life too. Like basically, we went to moon is because of Cold War. Yeah, we went to moon. We went to another planet is because of Cold War. Yeah, and this is also another story, by the way. It's really good, really great. By the way, this is I should supposed to be in here. By the way, the information that I try to tell you in this particular artifact is not exactly right. Is not exactly wrong either. It's just my opinion. Do not seek this information correctly. If you want this information, go to the internet, go to the ChatGPT, go to the AI, go to the all those stuff and figure it out by yourself. It's just my opinion, and it might be a wrong too. This is it. Thank you.